All right, let's talk about liquidity pools. I've explained this to so many people, and the one analogy that pretty much everyone got instantly is the idea of an exchange. So, if you go to the airport and you're looking to exchange your money for a different currency, you would walk up to one of these groups, or you might do it before you go to the airport. They might be cheaper, right? But let's say that you have USD that you want to change into pounds, British pounds. You would go to any of these money exchanges, and you would say, hey, I have $100, I want to get pounds, can you give me some pounds back? And they'll say, yeah, here's the current exchange rate, and here's the number of pounds we can give you. We're going to take a small fee, right? And that's very common. All of these will take some sort of fees, and in some cases it's a percentage fee, right? So if you're trying to exchange $100 versus $1,000 or $10,000, the fee might be different depending on how much money you're actually trying to exchange. And so with liquidity pools, what's cool is that you're the one that's going to be providing that currency. So imagine that if you were able to provide all of the USD and all of the British pounds, and anyone who wanted to do that swap, the fee that this unit collects, it would come to you. And so that's the basic idea of a liquidity pool. When you put your money in, when people make their trades between one currency and another currency, or in our case, one token and another token, then you will collect the fees that they pay in between, depending on what portion of the pool that you own. So let's talk about this a little bit more, right? So let's take a look at how does the market work currently. And when you buy something on, let's say, Coinbase Pro or something, they use something called the order book method. And I think it's really important to understand the background between what used to be there and what DeFi is doing, so that you have a deeper level understanding of how all of this works, and you can also explain it to other people, right? So with the order book method, basically there are going to be people who are willing to sell at a specific price, and there are people who are willing to buy at a specific price. And the spread is essentially just the difference between the two. And it's trying to match a specific buy with the person who's specifically trying to sell, right? And so if no one is selling at that price, then your buy won't go through. And as more people try to buy, the price may go up because each of the people that are trying to sell, that gets eaten up and they have to increase their price, right? So the order book method is very common for stocks and for centralized exchanges when people are trading. And so this requires matching a buyer to a seller, and that's not always the case, right? It might be difficult to do that, especially for newer tokens that not a lot of people have. So what liquidity pools allow you to do is everyone that has these two tokens can now put their portion into the pool, and with multiple people putting it in, there's one giant pool that just has all this money. And so trades can be instantaneous because you're not waiting to match a buyer and a seller, and it's all calculated automatically. And I'll show you the formula in a second because it's not that complicated, where when the pool of money is there, if anyone wants to exchange, depending on how much they want to exchange, it'll automatically show them how many of the other tokens they're going to get. So in this case, I'm showing Gala USDC. I'm a huge fan of Gala. Obviously, none of this is going to be financial advice. It's all educational purposes. But the rate here is one Gala is about 30 cents. Give or take, and the amount of total locked value, so total value locked is TVL, is 1.17 million. And that's because there's 2.26 million Gala locked, which at about 30 cents, and then USDC there's about 500k. So if you add those together, you basically get this amount that's being locked in there. So lots of different people have pooled their Gala and USDC together to create the total value locked to be over $1 million. And now when people want to trade Gala, if they want to buy or sell, they can come to Uniswap in this case, and they just pay the 1% fee for this pool and are able to get whatever they want in return, right? So if they're trying to buy Gala, they would sell their USDC for getting Gala in return. If they want to sell their Gala, then they do that and they get USDC in return in this specific case, right? So You can see the volume here on Uniswap as well. So this is 21,000 in volume, and then the total fees collected in 24 hours was $210. So in this case, if you owned 10% of the liquidity provided here, so let's say 117K, if you supplied 117K of the total liquidity, you would get 10% of these fees as well. So it doesn't work exactly like that, and in a future video I'll explain what concentrated liquidity is, but for the sake of simplicity, you would have gotten $21 for supplying your 117K, and you might get that repeatedly depending on whether the trading that is happening is in the price range that you originally set. So let's talk a little bit about this automated market maker and how it generates the prices that people can pay, right? And I'm also going to explain a few things that you might have seen before but didn't really understand fully. So in this case, let's say that you're doing a pool of ETH and USDC, right? So let's say that the starting price of the pool is $3,000 per ETH. So if there was only 10 ETH in the pool and 30,000 USDC, that's about $60,000 in total locked value, or I should switch this to total value locked. Then what's going to happen is if I wanted to buy just one ETH, what I actually have to do is when I buy this ETH, I'm actually raising the total price of ETH. If this were the entire liquidity pool and the only way to swap ETH for USDC, the price of ETH would shoot up by almost a quarter, right? 25%, 24%, just from my one trade of buying one ETH. And the reason for that is because one ETH trade at around $3,000 is a significant portion of the total value locked. That's 60,000, right? And so what ends up happening is the automated market maker, which is the formula that's being used instead of the order book method that I was showing you before, it just takes the token amount of the first token and then the token amount of the second token and multiplies it together. So in this case, 10 times 30,000 is 300,000. And what ends up happening is in order to calculate how much someone actually has to pay or receive, whenever this amount changes, it'll just divide the total amount here. So you can see here, whatever this number is fixed because this was the starting point for the liquidity. So 300,000 divided by this 9 will be the amount of USDC that's in the pool, which means that for every additional ETH that you're pulling, you'll see that this increases by more and more. So one ETH in this case, even though the starting price was $3,000, you can see here that actually I had to pay $3,333 in order to buy that one ETH. And that's because even small amounts when there's not a lot of liquidity will cause the price to increase. So if I'm buying 0.4 and then 0.6 and then 0.8, so each of these amounts, every individual piece that I buy is going to be more and more expensive because there's less and less ETH in the pool, right? And that's all this formula does. It makes it so that if there's less of something in the pool than the starting amount, each incremental buy is going to cost more and more. And that's why you can see if I were to try buy 5 ETH, right, and this was the total pool, then the price of the next ETH is going to be massive because it always has to do 5 times 60,000 is equal to this 300,000. So in that process, anyone who's doing this trading, if you're providing liquidity, you get a fee based on whether they're selling ETH or selling USDC. But the formula is very simple. It's just whatever this number is, you multiply it together to this, and then the pool amount, the new amount of how much you might have to pay is here. And so this is where we'll see price impact as well, which I'll explain in a little bit. But essentially, this is why all of the new tokens, they want you to lock liquidity, because when the prices are higher, in addition to removing them from circulation more easily, let's say that we started with 100 ETH, right? Which means that maybe the starting amount here is 300,000 USDC, and not all pools need to be 50%, 50%. I'll explain that in a future video as well. But in this case, that's a total of 600,000 USD that's locked in terms of value. And so if I wanted to buy one ETH, you can see here that the price difference is way lower. So 2.03% versus the 24% that we saw earlier when this was going from 10 ETH to 9 ETH, right? And so if we go even more and say there was 1,000 ETH to start, and I tried to buy one, it didn't move the price by much at all, 0.2%, right? So the more value that's locked in there, the less of an impact that big buys will have. When you start doing big buys like this, you can see that it still makes a pretty significant impact, but it always just follows this formula. If you just take whatever the total value locked of one coin and the other coin, multiply them together, and now you can use it to calculate the new price depending on these various buys. So this, I'm going to show you how it impacts you. If we go to Uniswap, right? So we'll show some things here. If I was trying to trade 100,000 USDC for Gala, right now you can see the impact is pretty significant. And whenever you see this type of 4.21% is quite high, because as I just showed you here, every incremental Gala that I want to buy, it becomes more and more expensive. So the total value that I get back is actually significantly lower. On top of that, there's a fee. So the Uniswap actually uses an auto router, which is pretty cool. And so it's sending 80% through this USDC wrapped ETH pool first, which only has a 0.05% fee. And then it's doing the wrapped ETH to Gala pool for a 0.3% fee. So it's sending 80% through that to try to minimize gas and the total fees that you're going to pay. It's sending 15% through that initial one that I showed you, which is the USDC/Gala pool. And then it's sending it through a cheaper pool as well. So there's all these different pools that happen, and these price impacts are pretty significant. So you can see here 1.15%, and then additionally for the various fees that we're paying. If we reduce this, so let's say that we're only doing 10,000 instead of 100,000, this should update in a second. You can see that the impact is a little bit lower, right? And so if we're only trying to trade 1,000, should be even lower. And so this is one way where you might need to set some slippage in if you're doing big deals, where because we've seen that it impacts how much it changes based on how much liquidity is locked, the total amount that you want to trade, if you don't want as significant of a price impact, as long as the gas doesn't outweigh it, you can do multiple small trades instead of doing one big trade. And so you might also want to wait for someone to sell and kind of readjust and things like that. But this shows you not only the impact that I was talking about here, but also the different pools that Uniswap is taking to try to optimize the route, and where as a liquidity provider you would potentially get money here, right? So let's take a look at the USDC ETH pool that I was talking about, and you can see here that the total locked value is 343 million compared to the Gala one is only 1.17 million. So if I wanted to do a big trade on the ETH USDC pool, it's not going to be anywhere close to an impact as the Gala one. And we can just see that in real practice here. So let's swap this around to ETH, and then let's say that I want to do the 100,000 that I was originally doing, where we saw a 4% impact. And so it's loading. You can see here, I think this is still loading a little bit. So we'll give it a second to fully load. But what it'll essentially show is that it's much less of an impact. So price impact 0.18%. Here we're seeing 0.298% compared to the 4% plus that we saw. And that's because there's just so much more liquidity locked in here. And then the fees here are also a lot higher. So if we saw the original one over here, $210 in fees in the 24 hours. But in this one, you're seeing 202,000, so 202,000 fees. And so the difference is that depending on what liquidity you provide, you only own a portion of the fees here. So if you provided, to provide 10% of this would be 34 million in total value locked that you would need to provide to get 10% of this, right? So that's the calculation you always want to run, is what percentage of the pool would you actually make up, and that same percent is of the fees is what you would get. So you can do this as a daily return on investment as well, just by dividing these two numbers, and that gets you a rough idea of what percentage you might be able to get daily. Generally speaking, the pools that have higher fees are better. So 1% is going to be better than a 0.3%, is going to be much better than a 0.05% because that one's just not collecting that many fees. But this is not always the case, and that depends on volume as well. So if there are more people going through the 0.3%, then this one might actually collect more fees. And so this is something to play around with. If you're on info.uniswap, you can just look at all these different pools and see the total value locked, see the volume in the last 24 hours, and the price of the tokens as well. So all of that is available on info.uniswap. And then adding liquidity is pretty easy as well. So if you're on this page and you don't really know exactly how to add liquidity, you can just go to the pool section. And then under the pool section, there's this whole article on learning about liquidity, providing liquidity, and it talks you through the 5 steps of selecting your pair, selecting your tier. So I talked about, different pairs will have different fees, and generally if you're trying to make money in this for good pairs that you believe in both tokens, the 1% fee will tend to make the most money, especially if that's the only one that exists. If people are trying to trade 2 tokens and there's no other option except for this, then this is going to make the most money if there's high volume there, right? And then price range I won't cover in this video, and then you just choose the amount that you want to deposit, you approve the token for trade, and then you basically click add liquidity. And so when you do that, it'll also show up in your pools. So you can view it like this, and then you can click into it. So I'm going to show you from here. You can actually take a look at everyone who's added liquidity recently. And so I just picked up a random one of these people. And if we look at the transaction that specifically happened, we can see the initial amount that they added and the Uniswap token that they got back. So this is the pool ID that they actually get back, 183383. And so we can take this into Uniswap and put it up into the URL right here, so 183383. So this person originally put in, and this was about a day and 2 hours ago, 4,000 USDC and 1 ETH. And that was the amount that they deposited. The ETH at the time, if we click over here, it shows us is $3,214. And this has since decreased. So what we expect, because when people try to sell their ETH and basically the pool is going to have more ETH than USDC. So when we look at this pool, we expect it to shift more towards ETH and less towards USDC, similar to what we saw in these previous example, right? So here it was actually the other way. So in this case, if people are actually buying ETH, then we know that this should shift. Let's say that people bought 30 ETH, then the pool will shift like this, where there's more USDC. In the current example, because ETH actually went down and the price is down from where it was before, what we expect to see is that the total in the pool is more ETH and less USDC. So let's take a look at the pool. And so this will refresh, and we can see that's exactly the case, right? So we're seeing 3,160 USDC versus if we look at what they deposited, it was 4,000 USDC. And then this person got more ETH back. So 1.266 ETH. And in fees, they've collected $14.47 in the day and whatever number of minutes, 1 day and 2 hours ago. In that period, they've collected this amount, right? So if the volume doesn't really increase and it kind of stays like this, this will always shift depending on whether people are buying or selling ETH. And then this will depend purely on the volume and how many transactions actually go through this 0.3% fee. And for larger amounts and for very high volume, you'll actually be able to see this update in real time. A lot of my pools, as soon as a trade happens, I'll see this number go up. Here you can see that this number is changing a little bit because maybe the value of these tokens themselves are changing a little bit. But this kind of gives you a high level of overall liquidity pools, when you provide a liquidity pool, you're going into the total value locked. Your end screenshot kind of looks like this, and you collect fees for anyone trading using this pairing. Different pools will work different ways. So this is Uniswap on the Ethereum blockchain, but there are also SushiSwap, PancakeSwap, QuickSwap on various different places, and those all also work very similarly, though the fees might vary from place to place. So I hope this gave you a good overview of liquidity pools. In a future video, I will cover specifically ranges and how concentrated liquidity works and how you can make more money by concentrating your liquidity into specific areas of the pool. So instead of doing a very broad, hey, if any trade happens between Ethereum at, let's say, 2,500 all the way up to 5,000, what you end up doing is splitting up your liquidity across this. So you own a less percentage of that particular band. And so it can help, especially during short-term periods, to put up all of the liquidity into a few bands so that you own a higher percentage of the trades that are coming in and take up more of the fees as well. So if you have any comments, questions, leave them below. Follow me and subscribe at Blockchain Meta. Hoping to put out a lot more good content for you guys. Thanks so much. Bye.